creativity is tied into consciousness, mindfulness, spirituality, that you make the best art when you're grounded and connected, and that you can actually retrieve these intelligent, wonderful ideas from what I call creative intelligence when you do that.
Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art.
Good day, spiritual artists. This is CJ Miller, the host of the Spiritual Artist Podcast and the YouTube channel with the same name. If you're following this channel, you probably already understand that creativity is tied into consciousness, mindfulness, spirituality, that you make the best art when you're grounded and connected, and that you can actually retrieve these intelligent, wonderful ideas from what I call creative intelligence when you do that. My first book was called The Spiritual Artist, and it was about how do you do that? How do you walk into the studio and get into that place where creative ideas flow through you? Well, I wanted to create a second book, and that's what this is about. I want to tell you about my new book
Called Spiritual Parable as a Daily Practice. Modern Stories for the Spiritually Curious.
This is coming out on September 8th on Amazon, but you can also pre-order it on Barnes & Noble today. There is a hardbound version on Barnes & Noble, or you can wait for a cheaper version on Amazon. But I want you to order it on September 8th because that will help me with my book sales. But let me tell you why I think this is a good book for you. And let me tell you how I created this book. I'm going to be honest with you. I've always felt that I could connect to my higher self. It's something that I always had. And only in the most recent years have I started realizing that perhaps if I get grounded and calm, sort of what I do when I do a spiritual declaration for someone, is I receive information from what I would call my higher self. My higher self. So I did something really odd for this book, and it was very daring for me. I decided to practice getting into that higher self and downloading spiritual lessons. And that's what I've done. I've downloaded spiritual stories in a lesson format, spiritual parable that you can listen to for 40 days. So what's so great about this is these stories, they're not full of religion or dogmas. They're stories about average characters that you can relate to, but they're all about what I call a spiritual truth. A spiritual truth is something that is eternal everywhere at all times. It is a truth. It cannot change. But what happens is we lose sight of those. We lose sight of those. So what this book does, it encourages you to read a story and realign yourself. Now, there's two ways of doing this book. One, you could just get it and you could randomly flip to a story. And I'll tell you what, I was struggling with something today, a problem I had with a situation with a friend of mine, and I decided to just let my finger run down the spine and pick the story that would help me through that problem. Have you ever done that? Have you ever just picked up a book when you're troubled and say, Spirit, higher self, tell me what I need to hear right now. Take your thumb along the spine and feel the pressure. By the way, you can actually do that when you paint too. You can put the brush above the canvas and feel where it takes you. So anyway, it opened up to the perfect story for me. It was called The Joyful Heart and the Hummingbird. And it's what I needed to hear. I needed to hear that I needed to trust myself and listen to my own heart in this situation. And in this situation that I was working through, I was not listening to my own heart. I was listening to the heart of someone else. But ultimately, we have to listen to our own heart. So where did this message come from? It came from my higher self. So I've learned to get grounded. And when I wrote this book, I would actually connect with my higher self and start asking questions and just hearing what came back. Just hearing what came back. And then I would take those answers and I would write a story about it. There's 40 great stories in here, and they're all tied into situations that stop us from being creative, situations that hold us back from receiving that creative intelligence. So my first book was about the process of standing in front of the easel. Spiritual Parable is about the process you should do before you stand in front of the easel. When I was training as a life coach at the Centers for Spiritual Living in Dallas, Texas, they taught us that spiritual practice is really important. Spiritual practice is when you make a conscious decision to sit down each morning or night, whichever works for you, and kind of realign with your higher self, realign with spiritual truths. And so when I get up in the morning, I'll drink a cup of coffee and I can read this book. So you're supposed to do 40 consecutive days. You commit to something for 40 days. If you skip it, then you have to go back to day one. It took me 3 months to get through that book. So I'm not saying you're going to get through this book really quick. But what I am saying is that you're going to read a chapter and it's going to move you. You're going to recognize something in yourself. It's going to remind you. What's really neat about it is at the end of each chapter, I have some contemplative questions that you can read, and then an affirmation. A perfect way to start the day. You read a story, it makes you think about something in your life. Then you have contemplative questions and you go, how am I like this? When do I not listen to my heart? When do I let others pull me from my center? And then there's an affirmation that reminds you of who you are, the power that is within you. So, if you've gotten this far and you've listened this far, I hope that you are a loyal spiritual artist. And I really hope that you consider purchasing this book on Amazon on September 8th or pre-order it right now on Barnes& and Noble, and I will have the information in the bio of this that you can go directly to that page. But this is how you practice being an artist. Align yourself, and then you hear from your higher self, and then you paint. It was through this practice that I was able to write this book. I learned this when I was painting. I learned the importance of aligning myself during painting. Judgment, criticism, fear, worry, other projects, they all get in the way of you being consciously connected. When I did this painting behind me, it's totally free and abstract because I let myself get into that place, get into that state of a spiritual artist, get into the consciousness, the connection to a higher self, and I let it flow. I let it flow. So, spiritual parable as a daily practice. I hope you consider buying it and let me know. At the end of this, I'm going to stick in some quotes. I actually had a focus group. I put together a focus group, about 20 people who've already read the book. What's so fun is that constantly I'm getting texts or Instagram messages where people are saying, oh my gosh, this chapter really struck home. This made me cry. This chapter opened me up. This chapter changed my life. That's really what I want to do. I want to help people. I want to help people on the journey. That's all I want to do. So go out there, take a look. The Spiritual Parable as a Daily Practice by Christopher Miller. It's on Amazon and it's on Barnes & Noble. And I hope you continue following the spiritual artist. Go out there and be creative.
Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.